Hi, everyone. It's Amanda Rieger Green. Welcome to Soul Sessions. Thank you for joining me today. I thought, in resonance with the energy of the nine, especially in September of 2025, being in a nine universal year in a 9 month, that I would talk about closure and karmic cycles and sacred closure. As many of you know, I am have moved to Ecuador. And as I am recording this, I am still in Wimberley. But as you are hearing this, hopefully I have arrived safe and sound with my husband and our dogs in Ecuador. So I am conditioning that pathway forward. But one thing I want to convey is, in training with the frequency of sacred closure, Wimberley for me, which is where we've lived the past 3 years, is a place that holds a unique frequency and tone and has been quite significant in my journey and in my path. In 2013, I lived in Houston, Texas. And when I got sober, when I decided to get sober, when I hit that rock bottom of desperation and utter destruction, complete breakdown, that breaking point that really felt like there was no way through. I woke up early one morning after just a series of horrible events that climaxed in my alcoholism and addiction. And if you've listened to the podcast, there are episodes where I talk about the dark night of the soul, and that really was the darkest time of my existence. And it really came to a head in May of 2013. And through a series of divinely orchestrated events, I ended up in a treatment center, an alcohol and drug rehab treatment facility and mental health treatment facility in Wimberley, Texas. And that morning, when I decided I needed help, I wanted help, I also knew I needed some kind of inpatient treatment. We canvassed a handful of treatment centers and options, and somehow, some way, right, as if by divine circumstance, there was a treatment facility in Wimberley, Texas, and I made contact with them, and that was on a Sunday, and I showed up there on a Monday. And one thing I want to share about that is, we drove from Houston, Texas. My mom drove me. And of course, it was very delicate and frightening for her because she was afraid that I was going to jump out of the moving vehicle and change my mind. She said she was on pins and needles that whole drive, like a death grip on the steering wheel, just afraid that I would change my mind, spaz out. And because of my fragile and erratic state at that time, and it was both. It was very fragile and also unpredictable, dynamically erratic. She didn't know what I would do, but she really said the whole time she was driving. And from Houston to Wimberley is about a 4-hour drive, mind you. And there was plenty of opportunity for me to change my mind, say, I'm not going to treatment. And if you know addiction or alcoholism or have any loved one or personal experience with that, what the disease of alcoholism is not only cunning, baffling, and powerful, it's a disease that lies. It's a disease that says it will do one thing, and then the next thing you know, the switch flips, and then an erratic decision is made. And she had seen so much of that in me in the years leading up to that she was in utter terror. But she said she prayed the whole drive. And of course, I get sentimental in this because it saved my life, right? But we drove to Houston, and I didn't jump out of that vehicle, and I didn't fight. And I was terrified. I was terrified, but something was pulling me to Wimberley, Texas, much beyond what I knew at that time. But I have to tell you all something really strange and coincidental and funny. As we were driving to the treatment center, we're in Wimberley, and we're on the road that leads out to that treatment center that still is here now. And we passed by, we're maybe like 2 minutes away from the treatment center, and we passed by this entry to this neighborhood. And I said to my mom, "Can't you just turn in that neighborhood and drop me off at one of those houses?" Like, I was making a joke because I was, starting to get really frightened and terrified that, "Oh my gosh, this is real. I'm committing myself to a a treatment center. This is real. This is happening. I need this help, but I'm terrified to receive this help or what this means for my life." And I said, "Can't you just turn in that neighborhood and just drop me off at one of those houses? It looks so nice." And I remember us laughing, like crying and laughing in the car. And flash forward to, I guess it was 2023, 2022 is when it was, when we moved back from Belize to take care of my mom. We were gonna move back to Austin, but the housing market was crazy and inflated, and we needed something that accommodated us and my home office and all the things, and so we ended up in Wimberley, and we ended up buying a home in the neighborhood that I asked her to drop me off in. And like, none of that is lost on me. And there are a lot of divine synchronicities. And when I speak of sacred closure, I'm going to walk you through some of the story, because this podcast to me is very much about sacred closure, the energy of the nine, which is ultimately about letting go and surrender, tapping into your infinite wisdom, your infinite leadership, your innate inner truth. And in that moment, going back, flashing back to being in the car with my mom headed to the treatment center, as terrified as I was in this state of surrender and movement. And that's what the energy of the nine feels like. It's like this cease fighting, letting go, yet moving gracefully forward, or as if something divine is moving you forward, tethering you, pulling you. And that's what it felt like when she was dropping me off at that treatment center. And I want to tell y'all a funny story about that. So I get to the treatment center, they check me in. Nobody is there at the treatment center at the time. It was the evening and they had all gone out to an outside meeting. They had bussed them off. We called it the druggy buggy. It was these white vans that they took us to outside meetings. And I got to be a passenger on the druggy buggy many times. But anyway, no one was there. I get all checked in. There's a whole story that goes along with that. But um 2 days later, I had kind of come to, they had to put me in, an observatory inpatient to make sure that as I started to detox my body, that I did it safely. Anyway, 2 days later, they admitted this guy into treatment, and someone else was being dropped off. And this other gal that I met relayed this story to me. And this guy is on the front porch of the treatment center, and he's totally strung out on meth and I don't know what kind of drugs. And he's sitting on the porch of the treatment center, and he is vomited all over himself, and he's totally out of it. And it's like as you drove into the treatment center, he's like sitting on the porch, vomit down him, like terrifying, horrible, disgusting stuff. And my friend who I met there, her name was Heather. She said, "Amanda, I realized," she said, "I walked up and I thought if your mom would have driven into this, I think she would have turned around and driven out because she wouldn't have known." And we both said, "Gosh, thank goodness you didn't get dropped off today." And not because of that guy or what he was going through, but I think if my mom would have, like, driven in and it would have been like, treatment center circus, which is what it felt like a lot of the times. I mean, it was like the crazy house. I was in the nut house, but I was a nut. I, like, needed to be in the nut house, right? I think my mom would have chickened out because it would have been too drastic for her, but that didn't happen. No one was there. It was this lovely evening. The people that admitted me with gentleness, and they knew the things to say to comfort my mom, to comfort me, and to ease me in. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. But in that treatment facility in 2013 is where my spirit woke up. And I've shared in my dark night of the soul, that was the first time that I ever heard the voice of my soul speak through me in a twin bed in that treatment center. The I am. I am love. I am loving. I am worthy of love. I am giving love. I am receiving love. And my soul spoke to me. And it was like the architecture and the architect came together. And I know I've been using those words recently, being the composer and the symphony, the weaver and the web, the architect and the architecture simultaneously. But it was like time and space broke open, and it came out of a willingness to move forward and a complete surrender. That's the energy of the nine. And today, what I'm sharing is much of a love letter to myself and to my soul and journey as it is to the energy of the nine and what we are all experiencing this month in a multitude and a myriad of ways. Whatever you are personally wrestling with, surrendering to, moving through, discerning, tapping into your true note. So you can let go of old scaffolding, layers, conditioning that you've built around yourself out of fear, coping, desperation, need to, have to, want to, whatever parts of you are cracking open so more light can shine through and to you. That's the energy of the nine. In Wimberley, Texas, for me, I showed up, I got sober here, my spirit woke up, my soul came back into embodied form in a way in which I had been searching my entire life. So I came to treatment here, met a handful of people, I got sober, my life began to transform, and then the consequences of my actions needed to be responded to when I finished up treatment and moved back to Houston, Texas, and of course, that is a journey in and of itself. But I met a woman in treatment who was a business owner in a nearby town called Dripping Springs, another hill country town outside of Austin. And I moved into a sober living home in Houston. So when I moved back to work into a sober living home, AKA a halfway house, right? Like that's what it's also called. But I met a woman and she and I guess a couple of months in to living in our sober living home, we came back to Wimberley. I brought her back with me and I came back to the right step, which is actually where I went to treatment to tell my story. And anyway, when I came back to tell my story in Wimberley from Houston, sober a few months, with a little bit of traction, a little bit of life happening, life on life's terms, all the things that do ensue. I met up with my friend and there was this guy that I had seen while I was in treatment and at some outside meetings. And this woman, by the way, that I'm referring to, she owns a huge ranch. She owned a hay and feed store, like a total guy's girl, like tough as nails, not a girly girl. Okay. If I had to categorize it, not a girly girl. Anyway, I'm with her, but I see this guy and I had seen him before and kind of interacted briefly, but that was it. And, um, and I said to her, I was like, "Yeah, he's got something. He's really good looking." And all I was doing was making a statement. There was no innuendo there as, "I need you to introduce me to him," or, "I would like to have a relationship with him." I was in no place for any of that and not even in any kind of awareness. But she picked up what I was throwing down and she said, "Oh, I've known him forever. He owns a business in Dripping Springs, and you need to meet him. Y'all could be great together." And I was mortified. Also, I'm stone cold sober, so I don't really know how to process my emotions or flirt with a guy and I was not trying to do any of that, but she insisted that she introduced me to him. And again, mind you, I told you she was not a girl's girl trying to be a matchmaker, but she was so direct and blunt and insistent that I meet him. So she marches over to him and says, "This gal thinks you're cute," or I don't know what she said, but she said something to that effect. And I'm, like, shrinking into myself and mortified, so I, like, ran to the bathroom. Like a 16-year-old, I was so embarrassed, so I ran to the bathroom to hide because I just could not handle it. But anyway, I guess I, like, slithered back out and came out, and the gentleman, whose name is Dennis, who is my husband of almost 11 years, being as bold and direct as he is, just marched himself up to me and introduced himself and started talking to me, and of course, I just remember being totally out of my element, but we talked and he just said to me, "Hey," he had asked me where I lived and all those things and about my recovery, and, he said, "If I come to Houston, can I take you out on a date?" And I thought, "Well, sure, yeah." I just said, "Yeah, great, absolutely." So we exchanged information. But in my mind, I thought, "Well, this guy isn't gonna come to Houston. He's not gonna take me out on a date." Phew, I got out of this one. That was embarrassing, and I was so embarrassed. Anyway, you know, flash forward a week or 2 later, he reached out and he came to Houston and he took me out on a date. And, about a year and a half or so later, we were married. And we've been married for going on 11 years in October. So again, I met Dennis in Wimberley, another thing that happened here. This place is very sacred for me and to me. And Dennis and I got married here in Wimberley. We did not live in Wimberley. He had lived in Wimberley for a period of time with his mother. And we ended up getting married at a place called the Blue Hole in Wimberley, which is this natural spring that is on a ley line that is on the same ley line as Sedona. Wimberley has these incredible ley lines. There's a place called Jacob's Well, and there's the Blue Hole, and there are these natural springs that rise up that have these beautiful vortexes of energy. And this place does carry a very sacred and special energy. But we got married at the Blue Hole in 2014, in October of 2014. And this is where we celebrated our union, our match. And then we moved to Belize. We have a lot of friends in Wimberley because we both know people here. We developed relationships here throughout the years. And then, as you all know, when I moved back here in 2022 to take care of my mother, who was terminally ill with metastatic breast cancer, we bought a home in Wimberley. And this is where I took care of my mother. We took care of my mother in the last year of her life. And after that, we put her dog to sleep a year later. And a few months after that, my 17-year-old lab, Tex, we put him to sleep here. And this is a long journey with this place, Wimberley, that has called me back time and time again and taught me the most profound lessons of divinity, frequency, truth, grace, letting go, death and dying, alchemy, psychic and intuitive abilities, because as you know, my psychic and intuitive abilities came online through the lens of light rather than through the heaviness of darkness in Wimberley. This place and this space holds a frequency for me, but it's also held deep karma. I know that I have been here in this land before. I know that it is a place where I was intended to traverse or revisit, to be here, to close out time loops, karma, lessons, to walk through very sacred rites of passage, right? Sobriety, spiritual awakening, marriage, death, and also this rebirth back into remembering myself. And I have a lot of reverence for being here. And I think what has been the most profound period of time, and all of that is profound, right? These are big life events. You all can think back to places that hold significance for you, geographical places, homes, um, jobs, so many places, whether they are places we travel to on vacation or went on a retreat, or they are homes that we've lived in and that hold sacred space and memory. Places hold significance and rites of passage, and I encourage you this month, especially in the vibration of the 9, to look at some patterning and places that have held space for you in your growth, in your evolution, in your remembering of your soul's true note and frequency. For me, I think the most sacred and the most challenging has been the last 2 years after the death of my mother and being in that journey of grief, that nonlinear, jagged line of grief. Also, putting Tex to sleep, my dog Tex, my lab, that was like a crescendo of surrender. And I believe I've shared this with you all, but it was one of those moments that I think I had a breakthrough on a soul level when my dog Tex was in his last days. It was over Easter weekend, and so the vet was closed and he was declining, and it was just very touch and go and delicate and knowing when and what to do. And I mean, I know that many of you can resonate with this, making the decision to put an animal to sleep, that delicate but mature, responsible decision. It's so hard and gut wrenching to navigate. But the morning that we were driving him to the vet, um, to have him put to sleep, and it was just so hard. I called my oldest sister, Sally, and Dennis had gone out to walk our other dog, and he was gonna come back and get me, and we were gonna carry Tex to the truck, and, I called my sister, Sally, and I was just in an utter I was in hysterics, right? I mean, I knew that it needed to be done. I knew that he was going, and I had asked Tex, and I was like, I can't not cry about this because when we moved back from Belize, Tex was already old. I mean, I just told you I had a 17-year-old lab. It was like a miracle. I asked Tex when we moved from Belize back here to take care of my mom. I said, "Hey, I need you to come back with me and walk with me through this. Please don't go before mom does because it's just too much. Like, I need you through this." And he healthfully, like a miracle lab, was healthy. I mean, he had some hip stuff, but he was active and happy and healthy until, about a little over a year after the anniversary of my mom's death, and he did that. He did just what I asked him to do. I asked him to walk with me and stay with me, and I would say to mom sometimes and Tex, I'd be like, "Tex, pull it together, man." I'd say, "Pull your shit together." Like, I'm just gonna say, "Pull your shit together, Tex. You gotta be good. Mom's dying, like, I can't have you going too." And I mean, I would say that in jest, but also really seriously. But when it was time for him to go, I called my sister because I knew that she could hold space for my hysteria, because I knew that I was messy and broken and human, and even though spiritually, I knew that he was just transitioning to the other side, and it was lovingly time for me to thank him for being there and let him go. And I called her and I was upset and I said, "I'm just so aggravated because I wanted him to die at home. Our vet could come to the house, and put him to sleep at the house, but because it had been over the Easter weekend and things were busy at the vet, they couldn't schedule a time to come out to the house until the next day, and that would have been too much pain and agony for him or for us, and so we had to put him in the vehicle and take him to the vet, and I didn't want him to die in the vet's office. This is my human grasping, right? And you all know, like, I know in my bones that he's just transitioning out of this body over this rainbow bridge into infinite light and form, but humanly, it's like I was hanging on. That is not surrender. That is control and self-will and ego and hanging on. It's the human condition at its finest, right? At its finest and most desperate. And I said to my sister, "I'm just so angry that the vet couldn't get here and now he can't die at home and I have to take him." And my sister lovingly said to me, she said, "Amanda," and I intuitively knew to call her in my moment of duress because she is wise she's wise all the time, but she's wise under duress. And she said to me, "Amanda, you are Texas home. Doesn't matter where he physically goes, as long as he's with you, he's home." And that right there was all I needed to hear and know and remember that home is not a physical place. Home is an internal knowing, and it is an inside job. It's an innate fundamental connection. It's presence. Home is presence, feeling at home. And so, of course, we did get him to the vet. And I mean, even I think before they got that IV in him, he was going, right? But it was the sweetest and most challenging thing. But that rite of passage right there and that last gasp of letting go humanly of the people, spirits, and souls that I was connected with and attached to. It was kind of the last proverbial nail in the coffin, right? Let me just be a little wicked. It was like the last nail in the coffin around death. And after that, it was like this healing journey began, a different healing journey through a lot of surrender, grief, and letting go, a lot of sorrowful and tearful moments, but in a lot of hope, expansion, and opportunity for new levels of freedom. And that's what the energy of the nine can feel like. It doesn't have to be that gut wrenching rite of passage acute, but the energy of the nine can feel both sad and sorrowful, heavy, but it feels so true, so real. Just like me being in the car on the way to treatment with my mother and her being afraid I'm going to jump out of the car, and me making a joke about moving into the neighborhood and her dropping me off at some random stranger's house, but her taking me making the commitment to go seek help. Terror, fear, some divine comedy intertwined, some desperation also with an element of hope, of healing, of health, of well being. That's what the nine feels like. It is everything combined into one. And I've shared this with you all, and I want to remind you of this. The energy of the nine, the frequency of the nine, is the sum of all the frequencies that come before it. When you add the single digits 1 through 8 together, they sum total to 36. 3 plus 6 equals 9. So the nine is a crescendo. It's a crescendo of fear and pain and sorrow, uncertainty, doubt. And it's also love, it's joy, it's truth, it's inner knowing, it's innate. The nine touches a point of innateness, innate fill in the blank, innate truth, innate healing, innate love, innate leadership, innate joy, innate sorrow, innate pain, suffering. Fill in the blank. It's innate. It is in your cells and DNA. And it is not only an experience, it is a feeling that reverberates through you. So I encourage you as you embrace the energy of September, which holds a big note. We've got this capstone month in numerology. We've got eclipse season. Looking at points in your life, reflecting on those moments that may be laden with sorrow or pain, big decisions, but that also hold that pure frequency tone of truth. I'm going to move through this even though I'm terrified because it feels true, because I believe, I have hope, I have faith, I know I am destined for this. There's an element of destiny that comes with the energy of the nine. And that's what Wimberley has been for me. It's been this karmic destiny to walk through some rites of passage, to be able to reconnect and rekindle my soul's innate note. And that's what these last couple of years have felt like, has been this fine tuning, retuning my frequency field into a pure tone, pure note. And the last, I would say 2025, and I know I have communicated this to you all, but 2025 has been this sacred, this living meditation, this living mantra of coming back in tune with my oversoul, with my true note. And now when I'm in that note, I feel it. And there's a radiance that radiates through me and calls things into my life. And when I'm off key, off kilter, it I want to be back in kilter, in sync as easily and organically as I can. And I'm sharing this with you all to evoke some questions within yourself about karmic loops in your life, what is being mirrored back to you right now so you can find your own alignment. You can find what is true for you today and feel and know what that truth is, even if it has notes of fear and pain and suffering, or it is full of hope and joy and excitement. But really allowing yourself time to marinate and meditate in your destiny, your path forward, shedding anything that is not intended to carry you forward in this next 9 years ahead. And I'm speaking directly to 2026 when I say this. This time between now and the end of the year is asking all of us on a multitude of levels, energetically, astrologically, numerologically, from a consciousness perspective, to recognize what we are still carrying, what scaffolding exists around us that is limiting our radiance, our light, our happiness, our truth, our true note, and becoming willing, first of all, to get honest or to recognize it, but become willing to receive divine support, support from your oversoul, your higher self, to carry you through and orchestrate and open the passageways and doors for you to have the clarity to move through. Because the nine is also about piercing clarity. I think that is one thing that I find to ring very true for the vibration and frequency of the nine is it's like a ray of light. It's when you are clear, you're clear. It's like when you know, yes, this is what I'm intended to do. I don't know how the heck this is going to happen, but this is it. Eureka. It's like a piercing clarity. Look for your moments of piercing clarity. And not only in September, but between now and the end of the year, get clear with your clarity. I know I'm like, get clear with your clarity, but that's the nine. It's about clarifying your clarity, which is your true note, your passageway forward, and trusting that the people, places, experiences, resources, resourcefulness you need to carry you through and move you forward, meaning, you know, your feet to keep up with your soul, your feet to follow the call of your soul's forward trajectory, upward trajectory, inward trajectory, truly. It's really about this spiraling inward to your own true note. Trusting that you have divine forces encircling you, supporting you through, and that you are not alone, even though it can feel innately alone at times, that there is something bigger and that you are practicing, remembering how to be the architect and the architecture simultaneously, the weaver and the web, and this great web of reality. When I think back and reflect on Wimberley for me, I kept being drawn to this place for these momentous experiences in my life, joyful and painful, awakening alike, to grow me, to remind me of that purity and truth. What is going on for you right now that is calling you in to your sacred truth, to your own pure tone and pure note? And are you dedicated? Are you trusting that your path forward will unfold as if by divine magic? Or are you not wanting to surrender and wanting to keep your tight grip on the old pain, the old way of living, doing, and being? So I thank you for allowing me some space and time to reflect on Wimberley, to say thank you to this place, this community, this land, this vortex of energy that has forever alchemized me back into myself. And I hope that this resonates as far as your own experiences of where you are today, where you have been, and where you're going. But remembering that your presence is always transmitting in the field. And the more true you are to your own self, your note, your unique frequency in your divine presence, the more organic the magnetization of the path forward, the highest path forward will become. And that is a mantra and living meditation for us all as we begin to close out, finish up the remainder of 2025 in this 9 universal year, remembering the surrender and the movement simultaneously is the true note that we are all attuning to. Thank you for giving me this space. Thank you, Wimberley, Texas, for your grace, your boldness, your pain, and your wonder. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I hope you are too. Thanks, everyone, and be well.